Good morning. Imagine yourself walking down the street. You're surrounded by beautiful street trees. There's no noise of traffic that you can hear. The air smells fresh and clean. You feel safe walking on the sidewalk. A cyclist passes on your left at a safe distance in a designated area for people to bike. It's a beautiful day. You feel calm, at ease. You love the street you're on. Now imagine yourself walking down any street in present-day Ottawa. Think about how many streets are similar to the one I've just described. Are there any? Do you live on one or close to one? My name is Trevor. I live in Canada South. There are very few, if any, streets like the one I've described in many parts of our city, including in my neighborhood. Right beside where I live is a major road, Terry Fox Drive. If I had my window open, I could hear it. Cars and trucks travel at 80 kilometers an hour, the posted speed limit, but often the people drive much faster, 90, 95 kilometers an hour. I walk on Terry Fox to get to the closest grocery store, to visit local restaurants. Sometimes, when I'm walking with my family, including my two kids, I can't hear them talking to me. The traffic beside us is so loud. My kids are aged 8 and 5, and when we walk on the sidewalk southbound on Terry Fox from Hazeldean toward Winchester Drive, I'm worried that on that western side of the road, where the sidewalk is right beside the road, where all of those cars and trucks are speeding by very quickly, that one of my kids might trip and fall off the sidewalk into the traffic. We know that every year in Ottawa, people walking or biking lose their lives on our roads. In 2019, 9 pedestrians were killed and 3 cyclists. That's the less hopeful situation that we're experiencing. But it doesn't have to be this way. And I'm privileged to be part of a community of people in Ottawa, some of whom are on this call that are working to make a difference. I'm also a privileged white guy. In my work with the Healthy Transportation Coalition, I've been very fortunate and blessed to become friends with many people who are experiencing far greater challenges than the ones that I experience. And I just want to take a moment to put ourselves in their shoes. I have a friend, he uses a wheelchair to get around, an electric wheelchair. In winter, he's often forced to ride his wheelchair on the road because the sidewalks aren't cleared properly of snow and ice. As a result, he has to mix with traffic, and many people driving cars and trucks don't like the fact that he's in their traffic lane, slowing them down. But he's left with no other choice. If he wants to go to the bank or go work out at the gym or go out to socialize or volunteer, he has to make that choice because the sidewalk is a huge barrier. It's covered in snow, in ice, and he's fallen out of his wheelchair in the dead of winter because of that insufficient snow and ice clearing of the sidewalk. Another woman I've spoken to on the phone, whose story was highlighted in the Ottawa Citizen last winter, had to shovel the sidewalk to get her daughter to school. When there's a big snowfall, the sidewalk in their neighborhood that gets them most directly to her school just isn't cleared of snow as a priority. And so to get her there, she also uses a wheelchair. Her mom has to shovel while pushing the wheelchair. Another friend, an elderly woman, has told me that in winter, when it's getting cold, she has to decide whether or not she's going to heat her apartment to a comfortable temperature or whether she's going to be able to afford the OC Transpo bus fare. Ottawa has some of the most expensive bus fares in the entire country, and the budget that's going to be tabled next week at City Hall is likely to include a proposal to increase transit fares again by 2.5%. Making life for people who rely on public transit right now even less affordable in the middle of a pandemic when our economy is upside down and in turmoil and many people are out of work. But despite all these challenges, I try to never let go of hope. and I maintain a strong commitment to taking action with others, many, many others, to make things better, or at least less bad. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of the work that we've been doing at the Healthy Transportation Coalition and invite you to get involved in this important work. We were founded in 2014 to try to address some of these challenges. We were formed when we recognized the need for a permanent organization that would unite pedestrian and cycling and public transit organizations, advocacy groups concerned about environmental and social justice, anti-poverty organizations, organized labor groups, a real diversity of organizations. And we were united around trying to create a city that worked for everybody, no matter their age, no matter their income, no matter any physical limitations they may have. And one of the first big victories that we collectively had was getting the city to bring in a low-income public transit pass. Working with our members, allies, and supporters. And thankfully, City Council eventually, they came around. We won the EquiPass, which is a 50% price reduction off a monthly bus pass in Ottawa, if your low income qualifies you. The city has invested more than $8 million in the EquiPass since 2017. And for that, we are grateful. But when they first brought it in, there was only a monthly version of the EquiPass. So the EquiPass right now is priced at $58.25 a month. And a lot of people just can't afford that. And so in addition to the monthly version, we advocated for the creation of a single ride version of the EquiPass. So if you don't ride the bus often enough to justify spending $58.25 a month on the monthly pass, you can now ride the bus for $1.75 for a single trip. You need to fill out an application, which many people have found to be very cumbersome. It's multiple pages long. But these improvements have helped thousands of people more readily afford to ride public transit in Ottawa. And we achieved that improvement by working together. We've also been doing a lot of work in recent years to urge the city to prioritize building affordable housing near rapid transit stations. Now, why is that important? Well, we know cities around the world, when they build good public transit systems that are rapid, the land value around those stations increases. And there's $7 billion of public money being invested in light rail transit phases 1 and 2 in the city of Ottawa right now. And wouldn't it be such a tragic shame with all of that public money being invested if only wealthy people can afford to live close to those rapid transit stations? When we first started talking to the mayor's office about that back in 2016, the mayor's chief of staff told us, you know, we kind of missed the boat. All the land has already been sold, or it's in the process of being sold near the light rail transit stations. And he said, there's not really much that can be done at this point. But we didn't give up. We kept pushing. And in 2018, we launched a campaign with Ottawa Acorn, the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa, Centretown Citizens Ottawa Corporation, Somerset West Community Health Center, the City for All Women Initiative, and many, many others. And we pushed the city to identify parcels of land that governments own near rapid transit stations that could be used for affordable housing. And in April of 2019, the city responded. They came out with a report which identified 20 parcels of land near rapid transit stations in Ottawa that could, in fact, be used to build affordable housing. In addition to that, we worked with dozens of organizations and thousands of individuals across Ottawa to push the city, to encourage them to invest more money to build new affordable housing near those rapid transit stations. And in budgets 2019 and 2020, the city invested $15 million in each of those budgets to build affordable housing near rapid transit stations. In budget 2021, which will be tabled at City Hall next week on November the 4th, we're pushing for $20 million, so a $5 million annual increase to be included to build affordable housing near rapid transit. Now, in addition to all that work, we've secured a commitment from the city that when it updates its transportation master plan by 2023, it will put a focus on transportation equity. So what's the transportation master plan? Well, it basically is a long-term planning document that goes out 15, 20, 30 years, and it determines and puts in place a plan on where the city's going to build new sidewalks, where they're going to put in new bike lanes, where they're going to put in better public transit, where they're going to widen roads. And unfortunately, they're doing too much road widening for sure. So what we're hoping when they do that, when they put that focus on transportation equity within that transportation master plan, is that they will ensure that people who face barriers, whether it's related to their finances or some physical limitations that they have, or language barriers, or the fact that they're a newcomer to Canada, or because of their gender, if they face barriers to having a transportation system that works well for them, whether it's a sidewalk or cycling infrastructure that needs improvement or public transportation, that they're going to get some special attention in that plan. Now, it remains to be seen what the city's going to do in concrete terms to address the needs of disadvantaged people. But the privileged among us, you, many of the people on this call, myself, the many, many thousands of people in our society who are privileged, I think have a responsibility to urge the city to go as far as possible, to really knock down all the barriers that exist and to create a level playing field. By pushing for progress, we can create a transportation system in our city that works for everybody. We know there are several dozens of lower income neighborhoods in Ottawa. And this is backed up by an analysis the city did itself that aren't well connected to safe cycling infrastructure. They're not good places to walk because of perhaps proximity to traffic. There are neighborhoods that have a high degree of people living in them with lower socioeconomic status. And come budget time every year, the city should be making decisions that address the needs of people living in those neighborhoods in a strategic way. So the bike lanes that the city's going to build, the new sidewalks, the new public transit, they should be prioritized to go into those neighborhoods because a lot of people in them just can't afford to own a car. But if we're not intentional about that, those neighborhoods will continue to be disadvantaged. Now, the work that we've been doing, I think, has been playing a small role in making the lives of people in Ottawa better. But there's much more that needs to be done. So for example, we don't currently have an online booking system for paratranspo, people who rely on those smaller buses to get them to where they need to go. I'm sure you've seen paratranspo buses around. People who use wheelchairs use paratranspo, or perhaps they have some type of a cognitive or other type of challenge. They sometimes have to wait on hold to book a paratranspo trip for more than an hour. The City of Toronto has had an online booking system for Wheel-Trans, which is their equivalent of paratranspo, since 2010, 10 years ago. So we worked with people who use paratranspo to advocate that the city create an online booking system. And the good people we worked with who use paratranspo have been promised by the end of this year, by the end of 2020, they will have an online booking system. So they don't have to wait on hold for an hour on the phone to book a trip. Can you imagine if you had to use a wheelchair to get around? Think of all the challenges that you would encounter in your daily life. Of course, you would not need to have additional challenges like waiting on hold for an hour to book a trip. If you wanted to go for a swim, or go get a haircut, or get to your job, or get out to socialize with friends. So the city must do better, and we're hopeful that by the end of this year, there will be an online booking system, as has been promised. And we all, as I said, have a role to play to ensure the city does better. What we've seen happening in other cities since the pandemic started in March is very rapid positive changes. I'm going to quote very quickly from a BBC News article. From Bucharest to Brussels and from Lisbon to Lyon, the coronavirus pandemic has triggered unprecedented investments in cycling around Europe. More than $1.1 billion has been spent on cycling-related infrastructure, and 2,300 kilometers of new bike lanes have been rolled out since the pandemic began across Europe. Cycling has come out a big winner, says Jill Warren of the Brussels-based European Cycling Federation. This time has shown us the potential cycling that has to change our cities and our lives. In Paris, they built more than 800 kilometers of bike lanes in recent years, taking space away from parked cars and from people who would otherwise be driving on those roads. And they plan to give that space to people biking. Since COVID began, Paris has invested $300 million to build new bike lanes. Can you imagine? And that has such positive health impacts, mental health impacts that are positive, physical health impacts. It reduces the amount of air pollution and it encourages people to exercise. It creates safe spaces on our streets. It allows people to hear birds chirping in the downtown areas of their cities. When people want to bike to work or bike for recreational needs, they can do so without having to worry about getting hit by a car or a truck. In Ottawa, unfortunately, it's been a real challenge to see the same type of leadership here. There were efforts in the Glebe to try to get more space dedicated to allow pedestrians and cyclists to use Bank Street, but the local Business Improvement Association came out against the idea. The mayor came out against it, and he required 2/3 of all businesses on Bank Street to sign up in support of the changes that the local councillor was trying to make. And unfortunately, that was just too high a bar to meet. And the improvements that we needed to see were largely not enacted in the Glebe, though the Bank Street Bridge was improved, which is good news. We've also seen positive movement in Montreal, where again, space that otherwise would have been used by people driving was instead prioritized for pedestrians and cyclists to get around. They created temporary pedestrian and bike paths, 112 kilometers of safe transportation networks, 88 kilometers of redeveloped streets for pedestrians, slow streets, shared streets, family and active streets, pedestrian streets, temporary bike paths. And this is being planned in areas throughout Montreal. We're also seeing cities around the world and in Canada do more to make public transit more affordable for people. So in Calgary, they have a sliding scale transit fare. The less money you make in a year, the less you pay to ride public transit. So for example, if you make less than $13,000 a year in Calgary, you can get a monthly bus pass there for $5.50. In Ottawa, it's going to cost you close to $60. More than 10 times more. If you work a full-time minimum wage job in Ottawa, you don't qualify for the Equipass discounts because according to the city, someone who works a full-time minimum wage job makes too much money. And this is something that needs to change. We're urging the city to copy or at least learn from what Calgary is doing and implement a sliding scale here. We know Ottawa is blessed with many, many beautiful neighborhoods, many beautiful recreation areas that largely are thanks to the National Capital Commission. The NCC is responsible for many of those great paths that run along the rivers and along the canal. But imagine for a moment if those paths didn't exist, if we didn't benefit from the NCC's land and the infrastructure. Think about how few bike lanes we would actually have in Ottawa. It will give you a sense when you do that of how little the city is currently doing. Some of the things that we've tried to do also is work at a neighborhood level with residents from lower income neighborhoods to help encourage them to identify transportation improvements needed in their neighborhoods, in their communities. We created working groups with those people, conducted active transportation audits, and we held pop-up projects to give people a sense, even just for a day, how their neighborhood would improve if we saw the types of transportation improvements that they need in their neighborhood. So we put on glasses, so to speak, for a day, and we were able to see the neighborhood and how it would be better with these temporary pop-up improvements. So for example, in Herongate, there was a pathway that ran through Sandalwood Park, and we paved it with these black yoga mats to create the visual impression that the pathway had been paved. It's really, prior to that, just been a dirt pathway that over the years has been very hard for people to use to get to the closest grocery store, for example. People in wheelchairs who used the pathway told us that sometimes they would almost tip out of their chair because the pathway would become uneven. After doing the pop-up project, we then collected hundreds of petition signatures urging the city to make the pathway paved and to make the improvement permanent. Thankfully, the city listened after a year or more of advocacy. And that pathway through Sandalwood Park and Herongate has now been paved. We've done similar things in Vanier, where residents wanted safe cycling infrastructure and many more bus shelters to wait for the bus, because the buses in Vanier have tended to be notoriously late. So right now, Montreal Road is being reconstructed and safe cycling infrastructure is going to be installed, and 6 additional bus shelters are going to be put in along Montreal Road, thanks to the work of the residents there and the city councillor. We also worked in the Bayshore neighborhood, where about 5 million visits occur to the big shopping center there. Many of those people visiting the shopping center use cars to get there. And the residents living in the neighborhood have wanted a safe pedestrian crossing on Woodridge Crescent near the Bayshore Transitway station for many, many years. In September of 2018, we installed a pop-up pedestrian crosswalk. And at that event, we demonstrated to the city that if they build it, the pedestrians will come. They will cross the road safely at the crosswalk. More than 100 people used the crosswalk we installed that day. And we demonstrated to the city that a crosswalk there was warranted, and the city has committed to installing one there. We're pushing them to install it as quickly as possible. At a minimum, they've committed to installing it by the time light rail transit opens in 2026, which is obviously far too long from now. So we're pushing them to do it as quickly as possible. We definitely need to encourage the city to stop allowing the car to be king in Ottawa. We want the city to bring in healthy streets here. Now, healthy streets is a concept that was developed by a public health professional out of the UK. And on a healthy street, you would have really wide sidewalks, beautiful places for people to bike, amazing street trees that we could shelter under from the sun, the rain. A healthy street creates a welcoming on-street environment that we want to linger on. We would stay on that street because it was such a pleasure. It would be a community gathering place, a place to visit with neighbors, friends. We'd hang out with our families on those streets. We'd support local businesses on those streets. It'd be a cool place to hang out, and we'd feel at home on those streets. I don't know about you all, but I found that during the pandemic that we've all been experiencing lately, the one thing that has really centered me, kept me and my family sane and happy and healthy, is lots of time walking outside. We have all experienced many ups and downs this year. It's been tough. And I'm sure many people are, having a hard time. I know I have been. But one thing that just lifts our spirits is getting outside, going for walks. And so we've been in the Greenbelt a lot. We've been going to Gatineau Park. We've been going to city-owned parks. And it's been so helpful to my mental and physical health. So I want to invite you all to appreciate the green spaces that we have, to protect those green spaces, to help push to expand the green spaces, to make our streets those green spaces. Our streets could be parks, beautiful linear parks. They don't have to be traffic sewers. So I want to invite you all to help us create a city that leads in creating healthy streets, to create a city that prioritizes active transportation, that encourages people to use sustainable modes of travel, like walking and biking and public transit. We could have more bus-only lanes on our streets so people could get to their destination on time because the bus is going to show up on time. We can have a city that prioritizes government-owned land near rapid transit stations for affordable housing. Right now, I mentioned we've got a campaign and we need your help with it. We're asking the city to invest $20 million in budget 2021 to build affordable housing near rapid transit stations. And today, I want to invite you all to email the mayor and to urge him to make this investment. The email tool that will be shared in the chat allows you to modify the text. So if you want to add some other specific things, please do so. But please advocate for this $20 million or more, a minimum of $20 million to be invested to build affordable housing near rapid transit stations. Better yet, pick up the phone and call the mayor today, as soon as we're done this morning. He's going to be tabling his budget on November the 4th. That's just next week. So we just have a couple days left really to influence him to ensure he puts our priorities in the budget. There's still time, but not much. So please act promptly. And if you want more affordable public transit and more money for affordable housing near rapid transit, if you want more money for bike lanes, for wider sidewalks, for street trees, for more bus-only lanes, call your elected officials. They're literally asking you to do that right now because they're consulting on the budget. They want to hear from you. They need to hear from you. Finally, I also want to invite you, all you beautiful creative people, to record a short video message. We have a soapbox application. You can get up on your soapbox, send a message directly to the mayor in 60 seconds or less, and tell him why you want these types of investments in such a beautiful city. We can have a beautiful city. We have to demand that they prioritize the creation of it. We need a city that takes good care of everybody, no matter their age, no matter their ability, no matter their preferred mode of transportation. I know I want to live in a city that puts people first, especially people who are experiencing challenges or barriers in their lives greater than our own. We need a level playing field. We must address the historical injustices that have been persisting for so long in our society. Thank you very much for the good work you all do. I look forward to working with you and answering any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
What is the reason why proper boulevards are not factored into all of our roadways? Pedestrians would be much safer with street lawn strips between the roadways and sidewalks. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, they used to exist in Ottawa. I mean, Carling Avenue kind of has some of that left. I know the Lower Town Community Association has done really great work showing what King Edward Avenue used to look like in Lower Town. And it was a beautiful boulevard type street with beautiful street trees. I know that it would help to create almost like the sense of a linear park if the city built their streets in that way. So yeah, I think there's value in that for sure. And that's really why we're pushing for healthy streets to be committed to in Ottawa. And in 2013, we pushed really hard to get the city to commit to a complete streets approach to redesigning streets. But unfortunately, they interpreted that to just bring in complete streets when they're doing a major road reconstruction project. And what we're trying to tell them with healthy streets is that they can tomorrow go out and do these low cost measures to redesign streets. Things as simple as pylons to take space away from cars in our neighborhoods and give the space away to, or give the space back to people. That's the concept that we really want to see. So please join us in this work. It oftentimes is harder than it should be to get them to do what we know is needed. So the more voices we have, the more creativity we have in our advocacy, the better, and the more quickly we're going to be able to see the changes we need.
Sarah makes a great point in the chat there. She says, e-scooter pilot shows how few streets have grass strips or furniture zones. It's almost impossible to park them not in the middle of the sidewalk because that is the only non-car space. That's very true.
Yeah, and I think the city of Ottawa, I mean, like many municipalities, are challenged by, in many ways, an inability to raise income. I know that the political leadership in Ottawa right now is often not too keen to increase charges on things, but one of the things that we've been encouraging the city to look at is what other cities are doing, like New York and Chicago, with regard to Uber and Lyft. They charge a surcharge in those cities to those companies that are using the roads to profit, and oftentimes congesting the roads. They charge, I think in New York City, $2.75 for every Uber trip that someone takes. And there are millions of them. So it raises quite a lot of revenue. And then the city can invest it in things like better public transit or better street design. So that's something we're urging the city of Ottawa to do, is to increase what it charges for the Uber and Lyft rides.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Here's another one. What role could you imagine for cohesive aspirational policy that puts people first? I know you've spoken to this a little bit already, but
yeah, I mean, certainly that's what we need. We don't see it enough. There tends to be in Ottawa, there's a hashtag that spells Ottawa, AUTOWA.
yeah.
Because, as I was saying, the car is often prioritized. The traffic engineers say that if you don't let the cars travel at a decent speed, then people are gonna ram through crosswalks with their cars and people are gonna get hurt. But that's just total nonsense. We need to design streets that are safe for our families, for all people, for young people, for elderly people. And we need to recognize that there are way more sustainable and enjoyable ways to get around, walking, biking, public transit. And we'd all save a bunch of money if we had less cars. That is for sure.
Yeah, Nadine makes a really good point in the chat, and I can totally relate to this also living in Gatineau. There's a level of complexity added to the connection to Gatineau. There are limited bridges, and Gatineau is much, much worse as far as transit is concerned because there aren't any straight lines. Yeah, it could take somebody an hour and a half to bus in to the city as opposed to like a 12-minute car ride. That's true.
Yeah, for sure. And, we live in a region that's pretty big, right? Like amalgamation in 2001, forced on by the Conservative government at that time, merged massive areas into the city of Ottawa. And then obviously the Gatineau is a whole other area. But there's no reason why it should take an hour and a half to make it to Ottawa.
Yeah.
If we had rapid functioning public transit that really prioritize that, getting people quickly to places. Like Japan has these trains that travel at hundreds of kilometers an hour. But unfortunately, we just haven't seen the investments. We haven't seen the political leadership. And, I think the community has some responsibility too. We haven't pushed hard enough. So let's get going.
Touche. Curious if you know anything about this, but do you know what Bike Ottawa is doing regarding the budget?
Bike Ottawa is very active. I mean, they've been around for, I think, 30 years now, or quite a long time. They're all volunteer run, and I would highly encourage people to check them out. I've been an individual member of Bike Ottawa. They are an organizational member of the Healthy Transportation Coalition, and they do important work. I know their annual general meeting is coming up very soon, and you should definitely check them out. They do quite a lot.
Yeah, we actually had a great conversation with Barbara from Bike Ottawa about this theme. I don't know if she's on the call today, but do check them out. They are quite active. I know they're super active on Twitter. That's where I follow them the most. So I think if anybody has specific questions for them too, that's a good place to pop them up. So if anybody has any other additional questions, you can raise your little blue hand. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I think we have a couple more minutes left. I found a question in the chat. I don't know if this is one that you would know the answer to, but someone was asking if there are teaching this kind of thing, like process and urbanism classes at universities. things about designing transit and bike lanes for disadvantaged neighborhoods.
I can testify to that. You are the one that doesn't teach it.
There you go.
I graduate from their program, civil engineering.
Yeah, I would just say that in some ways, the U.S., some jurisdictions in the U.S. are having pretty advanced conversations about this. So in 2017, I believe we brought someone up from Portland, Oregon, and they have someone in the Portland Bureau of Transportation whose job is transportation equity. So they have a specific role for someone there. Not surprising that it's in Portland, but I believe in the 1970s when the US passed the Civil Rights Act, there were requirements that infrastructure dollars needed to be spent, or analysis related to equity had to be made with regard to infrastructure dollars that flows from the federal government to the states and whatnot. So it'd be great if the federal infrastructure dollars that flow in Canada could be put through that same type of a lens here. So we need, I think, a commitment at the federal level to ensure that infrastructure dollars that are being provided to provinces and municipalities have a focus on equity. And I think that type of federal policy change would be very important. I do know that there are great groups that I would recommend people look into. One is US based called Untokening, and there are a lot of urban planning professionals in the US, people of color, who are really pushing for greater equity and greater focus on addressing injustices within the urban planning field, but in society at large as well. And so I do think that this is becoming more of a popular topic. And another group that I'd recommend people look toward, there's a great YouTube talk that was done recently by a group in Canada called Leading in Color. And if you search for their video on healthy transportation, there's a lot of good information in that talk that person gave as well on some of the similar things that I was talking about today.
So I find it really interesting, some of the research that we've been doing at a national level on some of these issues tie together the fact that, you know, in Canada and North America, largely, we have this diversification of who we assign the responsibility for this, whereas other cities and other countries don't. Urban planning is not a profession in Finland, for example. That's left to architects. You know, we have this sort of decision that we want to create these different sort of buckets, and we put responsibility for design into different buckets, and then everyone else can kind of throw up their hands and say, well, it wasn't me, it wasn't us, it's this person, it's that profession who does this. And this is, I think, really key, is that a lot of these issues relating to healthy streets, safe transportation, social equity, you know, Indigenous reconciliation, social justice, these things all connect to sort of a broader, better understanding of the built environment as a whole, which is landscape architecture planning, civil engineering, architecture, urban planning, city planning, politics. These things are all connected. So, you know, I don't really have so much a question, but just want to point out that there are some really good resources in Danish, Finnish, Irish, Australian, New Zealand national policies on the built environment that that address a lot of these issues. And this is work that a bunch of us nationally are doing to try to build that here. I put a link in the chat box, but you know, happy to answer some of these questions. But I think that if I was to ask an actual question, it's how could we imagine a model in which that kind of an aspirational goal, whether it's national, provincial, or local, is something that we can measure our decision making against, so that we don't end up with failures like Elgin Street, so we don't end up with failures like everyone pointing the finger at Paratranspo and saying, well, we'll fund it, but in 3 years. We need to see these things and be able to eliminate the cognitive dissonance we have that we think we're doing a good job when we're failing.
Thanks, Toon. Yeah, and I highly encourage everyone to follow Toon on social media and whatnot, because I often learn a lot from him. And I would just say, yeah, I mean, ultimately, we need more money to be invested in these things. So much could be done with no new money. It's just a question of the political will and better policies in place and a stronger commitment to these ideas. And really, for us to have the type of city we want, we need to push for it, and we need to push for it all the time, and we need to be strategic in how we push for it too. So in Ottawa, what we often see, I'm going to sort of get into the political right here a little bit, is that the progressives are outnumbered oftentimes with regard to these ideas on city council. And so they don't have the majority needed to get these ideas committed to. And so, you know, if we want to have a better city, we need to think about organizing in suburban areas of Ottawa so that we get people in office that are supportive of these ideas. But also, we need to do community organizing. So we need to really form strong relationships with our neighbors and our fellow community members to ensure that you know, we're taking action ourselves. Sometimes we don't even need government. We can just do things ourselves, and we should be creative when thinking about how we can do that, for sure.
What are your creativity practices that support you in doing the fabulous work you do?
I like music and listening to it and walking. Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Amazing.
You're awesome.